I know what you're thinking. Another Chicago story? This is the third time we have done an interview with someone who is on the ground, a leader in Chicago. And I get it. This is a story that's been going on for a while. It's a story very special to me. That's where I was born, in the city of Chicago. And also, this conversation is different. It's with Congressman Mike Quigley. He represents a part of the north side of Chicago and then out into the suburbs. And he's been in Congress a long time, almost 2 decades now, served on the city council before that. He loves this city, and he comes at these issues, which are so inflammatory, with a calmness, a steadiness, a strength, and a sense of hope that I hadn't heard before. He loves this city. He has confidence that it will come through this and that we all will as well. So it was a really great interview to have with him. And if you enjoy it and enjoy the work we're doing here, try to bring in newsmakers of these major events of our time, please like and subscribe. It'll help us, and I think help you as well. You'll get more notice of the work we're doing. And so here is our conversation with Illinois Congressman Mike Quigley. Congressman Mike Quigley, thank you very much for being with us today. Really appreciate it.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Well,
Difficult
as I was
times,
saying,
but it's good to be on the show.
it is tough times, and I appreciate your presence in particular because, as I said, you represent a district that covers where I was born in Rogers Park, where I went to grade school in Mount Prospect, and where I graduated high school in Barrington. So I feel close to you, even though we've never met.
And it's hard to believe you didn't go to one of our colleges, but that's all right.
I went north to Appleton, Wisconsin, so
Okay.
don't tell my buddies. But I was at the Cubs game the other week, so that was a
Right
little
in the
bit of
neighborhood.
hometown celebration because they won both those games. But as you say, tough times now for the city of my birth, for Chicago. And let me ask you about how things are right now from your perspective as a public servant there. Look, you served on the city council and all over the city. How is Chicago handling this?
It's tough. I've crisscrossed the city in the last 2 weeks. I've been to the domestic violence courthouse yesterday, where the advocates told me that women who were seeking orders of protection had to leave because ICE showed up. And now people are afraid to simply show up. So much for keeping people safer. We've been to food pantries, we've been to shelters, uh, and their numbers are way down. Again, people are so afraid of getting picked up that they're afraid to go get food. They're afraid that they'd rather be homeless than go to a shelter. We've been to businesses, and again, I'm going to go to Little Village and Pilsen tomorrow. Businesses that have been open for 50 years are losing 20 to 50% of their business. People are just afraid to go outside in their own neighborhoods, in their own cities. So it's a city on edge. It's angry. We're going to have No Kings rallies in the next several days. I anticipate some of the largest crowds in history. So it's a city on edge. I think a city ready to help each other. Uh, I'll give you one more horrible tidbit. After a number of parents were picked up after they dropped off their kids at school, who would have thought you'd hear this? We have white parents walking or driving brown kids to school because their parents are afraid of them getting picked up. So, in my wildest imagination, did I imagine that would ever happen here, or that the U.S. president would say that our city should be a, quote, training ground for the military to fight the enemy from within?
Yeah, it is shocking. A city on edge. And I just want to get personal with you a little bit, if I may. It's your city, right? This is you have served the city of Chicago for decades, for a long, long time. You're going to be the dean of the Illinois congressional delegation, but before that, the city itself. How do you feel as somebody who loves Chicago, who is represented and served it, to see it come under a kind of military occupation, right?
Well, there's no other way to describe it. these tactics aren't meant to secure, they're meant to scare. Now, look, this city has a long way to go to solve some of its issues, including keeping the public safe. And that's a critical goal for us. But this president's not trying to do that. I mean, if you take the money that they used to put the National Guard out in Los Angeles, Chicago could have hired 2,000 police officers if you think that's the only way to solve it. But instead, they cut $820 million in anti-violence programs. Our Arnie Duncan, the former education secretary, operates Chicago Cred. They've got a proven track record of preventing violent crime before it happens, but they're getting their grants cut. And I guess if the president really cared, he'd understand that in Chicago, most of our violent crime, the guns come from outside the city. They're being trafficked from the South, from Indiana, and elsewhere. So it makes you angry. I like to think it unifies the city under a difficult time.
Hmm.
I'm back out there crisscrossing every day, and I see a fear, but I see a unity, and I see a resilience. I walk the Mexican Independence Day parade with our friend Chewy Garcia, and the crowd was down, but perhaps never more proud and unified that this is their neighborhood, it's their city, and it's worth fighting for.
I love hearing that. I do because it is going to take people power peacefully, democratically, rising up and asserting opposition if in fact that's what they believe. And it does certainly, obviously, in Chicago. You were talking about, you know, how this impacts people's lives, that people don't come out on to go to the restaurants. I was when the troops were put in Washington D.C. I went around. Just an hour outside of D.C. here in Frederick, Maryland. Same thing. Restaurateurs said the reservations were down 20, 50%. Thriving neighborhoods where people would sit out on the stoop and play music or whatever, like a ghost town. Does it feel that way to you in Little Village and Pilsen and places that you represent?
It feels that way in a bunch of different areas, and it's scary. And I'm for now throwing out boundaries of congressional districts and going all over the city and the region, just because what affects one area affects all of us. Um,
Trust you.
and it is concerning. It's interesting that some of our big victories are coming from the courts. That's interesting that the two courts that ruled against the president on the National Guard issue, one was a Trump-appointed judge that ruled in Portland, and a Biden-appointed judge in Chicago. And how it affects our city, it's interesting. They pretty much wrote the same thing, that we are our country of constitutional law, not martial law, and sporadic, isolated violence at protest is not an insurrection. So I think you're seeing a city that's cognizant of the fact that this is a president who's willing to do almost anything, right? Uh, he could call this an insurrection and go beyond what they're able to do if he feels frustrated, because he's untethered by the facts, apparently untethered by the law, and the courts are more important now than ever.
Yeah, and we'll have to wait and see what the Supreme Court does with some of this. But I want to ask you about Trump. You've been in Congress a long time. Seen a bunch of presidents come and go, obviously, and seen Trump come and go. Now he's back. Uh, To what end? Is it as show of force, or do you agree with the people who say we are at risk of losing the democracy that we were given by our fathers and grandfathers and the founders of this country? And really, this is about seizing a kind of power that no one has ever tried to take up before in the United States. What do you think?
Yeah, look, Sinclair Lewis's book, It Can't Happen Here. What was that in the mid 30s? It strikes home now, 90 years later. It
Right.
seems impossible. Uh, for a lot of folks, nothing can happen until it does. Obviously, Trump's first term He called for the weaponization of the Justice Department. He did a lot of things. He attempted to circumvent the law and overturn a lawful election. And I was in the room where it happened. I was in the chambers on January 6th, and without the courage of the Capitol Police, I'm not sure I would be here. I'm pretty sure our democracy wouldn't. So, best indication of future behavior is what they've done in the past. So, a president who's committed crimes and a president who instigated a violent insurrection to overthrow the democracy is absolutely capable of anything. And I think the hardest part sometimes is communicating that. How do you message this to people who voted for his reelection after all that took place in his first term? How do you not sound like you're being hyperbolic when you talk about a president who has moved from maybe soft autocracy to tyranny? I think the lesson from abroad is there have been, as you well know, people elected democratically to lead their country in Russia, in Hungary, who then use the tools of democracy to attempt to break it down. I think that's what you're witnessing now. We're on the front lines of that here in Chicago, and I think it's incumbent upon all of us to be unified and understand that. Try to message to the rest of the country why this matters.
Vladimir Putin, I was covering, actually his, election right after he came into office in the end of the 1990s, and it struck me then that certainly subsequently, one of the most important facts of this century is that Vladimir Putin's a lawyer. He knows how to abuse the law and occasionally use muscle, but really it is the tools of democracy, as you so well said, to undo democracy, and Orban and Hungary and others, and now perhaps here. So let me actually play devil's advocate for him, or not devil's advocate, but for the people who are on the sidelines. As you said, people don't really move until they feel they have to. And they say, we do have this huge immigration problem. Biden lost control of the border. We had, who knows, 10, 12 million people come in without authorization of law and in the shadows of our workplaces and our cities. And somebody's got to clean that mess up, and this is the way to do it. What do you say to
Sure.
people who
I
believe
mean,
that?
first of all, I tell them that they should be aware that none of this is actually making us safer. I think what people voted for was a secure border, but they didn't vote to have a tamale vendor picked up after being 20 years on the job, making $200 a week, feeding his family, right? Um, they didn't vote to have soccer moms pulled out of their car with windows smashed, taken away from their kids. They didn't vote for, by the way, a Supreme Court who said it's okay to racially profile, and we now have masked, armed people who are, throwing women to the ground and grabbing kids, landing helicopters on residential roofs, pulling everybody out of the building, and kids afraid to go to school, kids afraid to go to the doctor to get vaccinations. But in addition, there's just some of the real meat to this, and that is, we've now learned that uh, federal officers and agents, law enforcement officers, are being taken away from uh, programs to stop fentanyl from coming into the country, to stop sex crimes from continuing. So this is a terror campaign, which is actually having a long-term negative effect on crime as a whole. And I suspect real concerns, as the head of the Illinois National Guard had said, with the long-term relationship between our military and the American people. And as I referenced before, when you have women who need an order of protection, afraid to go to court, not wanting to cooperate with law enforcement, which was the real reason we had sanctuary cities, you want the public to cooperate with law enforcement. If they're deathly afraid of them, then we're all going to be less safe. So, absolutely, let's secure our borders and let's go after the bad guys. But finally, they're not going after the bad guys only. We have cases In June, the majority of the arrests that were made, those people didn't have a arrest warrant. Those people didn't have a criminal background. They were just picked up because they were brown skinned.
Mm.
Unfortunately, we're seeing people afraid to go out who have green cards, who are citizens, because they just think that no matter what, they're going to get picked up. So this isn't what people voted for. They voted for secure
Yeah.
borders, not a terrorist state.
Well, my own dear mother-in-law, born in Indonesia, came to the United States as a teenager, has been here 50 years, almost, and yet she's wondering, should she go back to visit her relatives? Would she get back in the country?
Yeah,
And a lot
we're
of people.
hearing that from people who contact my office, that they're just wondering if they're going to be able to go back. Should they go anywhere? Should they travel at all? And unfortunately, it's crossing a lot of lines we hadn't seen before.
And Congressman, do you think that this effort and the furor that it's sparked in the country, do you think it's touched off something uglier too? You mentioned that it's people with brown skin who are essentially being targeted. Do you think I was thinking when I was growing up, racism was a shameful thing. Yeah, people had feelings, but it do you feel like something has been loosed in the country? Something negative, something vicious, and people are giving themselves permission once again.
That's I think that's exactly what we're hearing from people, that it's sanctioned this. It's turned loose that which has always been there among a certain percentage of the population, a disturbingly large percentage of the population. I had someone tell me on election day that this isn't all about racism. A lot of it is in supporting Trump. I heard someone say, um, he hates who you hate. And
Mm,
it's made it okay to do this, and it's turned something loose that's very scary. And just think about this: when you have masked, not even with badges, military force coming into an area and attacking people, throwing them in U-Hauls, unmarked vehicles in some cases. Um, what's to prevent vigilantes from doing the exact same thing? And if you're on the targeted end of this, how in the world would you know if this is ICE? How would you know for sure that this is law enforcement? That's a very dangerous situation for everyone involved.
that is really disturbing. Let me turn to one of the responses that has touched me. You talked about he hates who you hate. Let's talk about love for a moment. And the image of the parish priest leading his congregation with the Holy Communion to that holding facility, asking if he could just go in, asking very respectfully, I thought, to go in and distribute communion to those who wanted it inside and getting turned away. I guess that's one way of responding. We heard Pope Leo, Chicago Pope, right? Saying the church cannot remain silent. How do you see that playing out? How do you see the response of, people are trying to follow the gospel of Jesus Christ?
Well, I think there's a unity among all the major religions, this golden rule, which I'd like to think works. During Trump's first administration, I was a leader in talking about what was taking place as a member of the intel community, the first impeachment investigation. And people would often accuse me of, uh, when I was talking about it on TV, not being angry enough. And I said, there's a time and place for that, and I do it on occasion. But to your point, what I think is helpful is to effectively communicate to the people you just referenced who haven't made up their mind on this, right? The people on the sidelines. I often think of them as swing voters in swing districts and swing states. I've often tried to communicate with them. And I do think counting on people's faith or what they're seeing does matter. It can be effective. regardless of whether they have a faith or not. Just doesn't seem right, doesn't seem fair. When I talk to uh, members of my district, people in my district who are Hispanic, they often said that, a lot of their friends voted for Trump. And they said, the Hispanic community is not as liberal, some cultural issues as some people might think. It's not monolithic for sure. But one thing that has disturbed all of them is just, do you really go into a workplace and raid that? It's just steeped within all of our ethics, ethos, that our work ethic, that when somebody's working, putting food on their table, there's something very wrong with stopping that. You want to go after the bad guys, sure, but this isn't how you go after the bad guys. This is going after who we are as a people.
Let me talk about the Congress in which you serve, and that is uh, one that really hasn't, it seems to me, pulled its weight right now, right? It's supposed to be a co-equal, coordinate branch of government, and the whole theory of that is that they'll check each other's power, right? Checks and balances.
Yeah.
Now, you've been in Congress a long time. You have, obviously, if you've served on the Intelligence Committee, that's a position of high trust. Your colleagues trust you. Republican and Democrat, I imagine. What do Republicans say about this? Do they say one thing and do another, or are they all on board?
Well, I get asked that question a lot about things that President Trump has done in his first term and part of this. I break it into several groups. I mean, there's several Republicans who voted for impeachment and were either forced out or had to leave. There were those who stood up for principle, not their party, who stood up for the country and democracy. Some of them were beaten. So there are true believers. Trump can do no wrong. There are those who understand that they have to go along, get along if they don't want to get primaried. We have seen time and again what happens when any Republican steps up and speaks out against any aspect of what the president is doing. He has zero tolerance for people who disagree with him. So they're quickly ushered out. And then there's a group that will tell you, they think he's crazy, or they think there's something very dark and they're trying to help, but it's difficult. So, what do we derive from that? Look, I'm not even in D.C. because we're not in session. So rather than go to D.C. where we're not voting, you stare at four walls, or you can do some press. At least when I'm here in my district, I can meet with people, talk with them, work with my staff to try to help people as much as possible. But uh, the problem with Congress right now is we're not where we need to be, trying to get this government back open and harnessing a president who, as we've said, is untethered by the facts and the law. And the result is chaos and a real threat to who we are as a people.
Hmm. Well, Congressman, thank you very much. I want to ask one more question. How does this end? You hopeful? You pessimistic? How do you feel?
I'm always hopeful because when I meet and talk to people, I was at Nourishing Hope Food Pantry the first day of the shutdown, and the fact that people were there to volunteer who are at risk. There were parents going there to get food for their kids because that's what you do. There were people taking great risk to help others. That gives me hope. This is as dark a period as we've had in our lifetime, perhaps in the last 150 years. It's hard to imagine. So the risks are great. I still have hope. I'm energized by it. I'm energized by the people I meet who are doing extraordinary things under difficult times. Uh, we are always surrounded by greatness. I remember meeting people who won medals in combat, who defended our country, and they were just regular folks who at difficult times did extraordinary things. That's what I'm seeing with my constituents now. I'm very proud of them. I look forward to where we go from here. We have a lot to do.
Hope. I think we all share that. Congressman Mike Quigley, thank you very much for being with us. It was a great conversation. Appreciate it.
Anytime. Thank you.